Labour has announced plans for major reforms to Britain's house buying system. Under new proposals, sellers will be legally required to provide key information about their property up front, and the option of binding contracts could stop people from dropping out before sales go through. Labour says first-time buyers could save an average of £710, and that the reforms will speed up the process by up to 4 weeks. The Tory party, Mel Stride, Shadow Chancellor from the conference stage, also pledged benefits cuts in order to subsidise first-time buyers. And of course, from Green Party conference, we got the motion to effectively abolish landlords. It's a grabby headline. Megan, how does it work in practice? Can we abolish landlords? Is such a thing possible?
I don't know. It's not 100% clear. I did.
That's so generous.
Sorry.
Will it work? Well.
I did take a photo of, I've got one of their posters. So this is what they said they would do. So they'll introduce rent controls and abolish right to buy, which I personally think those two are quite sensible policies.
Yep.
Tax the landlords, that's what it says. Land value tax on owners, not tenants, with a 2 times tax on empty homes. Remove finance for landlords, end buy-to-let mortgages, provide finance to councils, second right to buy when landlords sell, establish a state-owned housing manufacturer to build council housing and innovate on design and manufacturing. So I actually personally think those are all quite reasonable things. But I think abolishing landlords, in a lot of people's heads, that probably makes them think guillotine. Like...
The Greens are advocating sort of bloody revolution against the landlord class.
Yeah. But actually, a lot of that is quite sensible. It's sort of essentially taxing or regulating landlords out of existence, which, why not?
Tax them out of existence, Luke.
I do respect it. I think it's a great idea to a headline policy like that.
Yep.
Abolish landlords. Have people say, well, that's ridiculous. I'll kind of know who your enemies are, line them up against you. And that gives you the space to then start talking about the policies that you want to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I've no doubt many listeners will be some of the more than 1 million people in Britain who spend more than half of their income every month on rent. I think there's something like 10 million households, 20 million tenants in Britain. And for me, the reason why we should abolish landlords, figuratively, no guillotine involved, Megan, unfortunately, sorry. I think the reason that we should abolish landlords is because it is essentially sort of a symbol of rentier capitalism, like this economically unproductive extraction of rent that treats housing as a commodity to be speculated, to accumulate upon, and not a human right, like a right to shelter and housing. Why should you be able to turn that into something to profit from? I'm not saying that we shouldn't have private. There's clearly space for people who need short-term lets. That should be accounted for, and private landlords is probably the best mechanism of achieving it. But it's the decimation of council housing in this country that has led us to this state. The fact that the vast majority of a lot of these houses used to be council houses, they were bought through right to buy. Thatcher government prevented the councils from replenishing their housing stock, and now they are private rents. And instead of that money going back to a council, it goes to a private landlord.
Yeah, and it just sits in their bank account, or is used to give £10 million to their kids. Like that's sort of
This is the crazy thing. It's like if I was to what's a good example? Like a watch, right? I'm wearing a watch. Listeners, I'm wearing a watch. I'm giving it to Megan. Megan, would you like to use my watch?
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yes, lovely. It's an Apple Watch for those of you who can't see, right? Okay. Ooh. I actually don't even own it. I've got it on tick. Like, I'm paying finance on it, right? But you, Megan, you're going to pay what I pay for it and a little bit extra. So I'm going to make a slight profit all the while you're paying it off for me. Turns out Apple Watches, the Foxconn factory shut down. There's been a run on Apple Watches. The price of it's now increased tenfold. By the end of the term, I take the watch. Thank you very much. I'm going to take it back from you. It's mine now. You have nothing to show for it, and I've got a watch that's worth 10 times more than what it was at the beginning.
And also, when I asked you to fix the strap, you were like, no.
No, you deal with it yourself. You don't have to fix a strap.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're not talking about watches, right?
Yeah.
we're talking about housing, and you're going, what do you mean? That's crazy, Ollie. Why would you do it like that? Yeah, you shouldn't operate like that. Yeah. It shouldn't operate like that. I don't know if I can explain it in any stronger terms. The abolish landlords is obviously a very catchy slogan. In fact, I'm pretty sure Navarra put it on T-shirts and baseball caps and things. Obviously, we're not saying we should execute them, but we should surely be interrogating the way that the housing economy is set up in this country and questioning whether it's the right way of achieving things.
Yeah,
Also,
totally.
yeah. Also, in this analogy, you've got someone like Megan who's actually working really hard, very productive,
Yep.
making great things for the economy.
Thank you.
She's a young professional working in the knowledge economy.
Yep.
And then you've got Rentier Oli, who is Lord Dugmore.
I don't like this analogy.
Yeah,
Lord Dugmore,
Oh,
who's
thank you,
actually
Say. Yeah,
lived
keep
there.
going,
You know,
yeah.
his family won, I don't know, some great the Battle of Hastings. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, yeah,
Which
yeah.
is a huge achievement, and fair play. Fair play for defeating the Anglo-Saxons.
Thank you.
Now the Anglo-Saxons must forevermore pay you money in the form of Rentier.
Exactly. There's a it's an astonishing percentage, which I'm not going to get quite right, but I believe it's somewhere between a quarter and a third of land ownership in Britain today. It is held by people whose lineage traces back to the Norman lords who were gifted parts of England by William the Conqueror, and that is just, I think, an extraordinary statistic. It's far more, land ownership is far more entrenched, far more connected to, well, the aristocracy, but obviously the other two big ones are the monarchy and the church as well, who own vast swathes of England, than people would ever realise.
I think also a lot of this speaks to the fact that actually we just need a complete attitude change around housing in this country to see social housing is a really vital and important part of the housing ecosystem, but actually hasn't been seen as something you should aspire to. We should sort of look down on it with things like Benefit Street, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
It's like there's an anecdote in Nick Clegg's book where George Osborne is asked about, can we give some more money to council house building? And he said, oh, no, we don't want to do that. We'll just create another generation of Labour voters. It's sort of like, well, actually, in other countries like Austria, council housing is seen as just housing.
Yep.
It's just like part of life. And
Yep.
actually, I think maybe part of this is that we need an entire attitude shift to see that, people spending the majority of their income on their rent to somebody who it then doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't really grow the economy because landlords aren't necessarily that responsible for growing the economy, are they? If they were, then we'd be great.
Yeah, it's extractive. That's the whole point. It's unproductive.
Whereas,
Go on.
if you give that money to social housing, or if it's somebody has actually got their own home, then that can contribute to growth or to improvements, because social housing, obviously owned by councils, that money can then be reinvested back into other things like public health, which then prevents drug deaths or improves people's mental health or is better for
It's the housing theory of everything.
Exactly.
It's the housing theory of everything. It's you provide someone with a decent roof over their heads, and you will see improvements in education outcomes, crime outcomes, health outcomes. Like it is a bit of an unlock for all of these various social ills that we have. There's two things I wanted to say, listening to you talk then, Megan. One, I was interviewing Mick Lynch once, and I spoke about social housing, and he sort of like sharp intake of breath. And essentially what I've been doing, I was using social housing interchangeably with council housing. And he kind of took umbrage with, in his view, social housing meant sort of, housing association, basically third party, private sector running sort of cheaper, more affordable housing. And he was like, no, I'm not an advocate for social housing. I'm an advocate for council housing. It was a distinction I was never really aware of because I sort of use the term interchangeably. And the other one was that Osborne anecdote about creating a generation of Labour voters. And it made me think of what Thatcher was trying to do with Right to Buy, which was a very conscious, deliberate effort via the mechanism of home ownership to create more Tory voters. Thatcher said economics are the method and the object is to change the soul. It was a conscious, deliberate effort by her. And you can look at places like where I'm from in the West Midlands, the outer suburbs of Birmingham, the constituencies that just turned blue after this policy, and a lot of them still are. It was a very conscious and deliberate effort. We should talk about the Labour Party's reforms. We should talk about the Tories as well, although I'm all for sort of deep dives on the Greens, and I suspect we'll be doing a fair few more of them, Megan, as they increase in prominence. Okay, Labour are tweaking. They're changing this sort of the whose responsibility it is to get the survey done on a house when there's a house purchase going. But I don't think it's a bad idea. You can look at places like New Zealand or indeed Scotland that have slightly different dynamics in the way that house purchasing is done, and they have far fewer collapse chains than we do here in the UK. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea. It does feel like a sort of a minor tweak when the scale of the housing crisis for me is sort of the millions of homes that need to be built in Britain. But nonetheless, it's not a bad idea, is it, Luke?
No, and I think it's a great day to be a surveyor because they're the real winners of this policy. Now, what I do think about it is, having searched on Rightmove myself to look for flats. You do look at a place, you go, oh, this seems great. Why has no one bought it in months? Why does the price keep going down?
Yeah.
You visit it looks nothing like the photos. You know, there's mold on the walls and the sound of music pumping from the neighbors next door.
Yeah.
And you start to realize, oh God, I've been tricked. And there is a sense of, it's almost like a false advertisement economy going on there where they're bringing you in. And it's in the estate agent's best interest to keep doing that as well, right? Because they've promised that I'll just get a certain number of people through the door to look at your flat. But what this would do is allow people to know from the face of it, the truth. You know, if it was a dating app profile, essentially what I'm saying is that rather than tell you my height, I'm going to get a third party to tell you this is what this man's actual height is. And so it's verified
6 foot.
Yeah, verified
Match,
6
match,
foot. And then
match.
you're just getting all the matches. And it means you waste less time. You don't turn up in a date and go, oh my God.
Yeah,
you know,
he has got a trust fund. He is 6'5" and he has got blue eyes. Let's go. Yeah.
Yay. Where are they?
Yeah, where are they? Yeah, where are they? All in the city somewhere. There's that. Do you hear that? The David Guetta remix of that TikTok? Tangent. Okay, and then the Tories, they're coming in. Benefits cuts. I think it's about nearly 50 billion worth of benefits cuts. Lord knows where they'll find the excess fat in the welfare state after their last 14 years in government, but they're going to give it a good go. And they're saying they're going to use some of the savings there to subsidise first-time buyers. Up to, I think it's a £5,000 per person national insurance rebate on a first-time purchase.
Yeah, and I would love 5K. And I think anyone listening to this would love 5K.
I'd love 5K.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a big
Megan,
5...
after 5K?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
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 Mel
yeah, I
Stride,
think
Tory
so.
voter.
big 5K
Yeah,
giveaway.
Yeah. I don't know. I think welfare cuts, like, I don't know. I was going to make a point about Labour, but then I was like, no, the Tories will just get it through anyway.
Yeah.
They won't have that problem.
I think it's quite a specifically sort of, it's like a Nick 30 ans or 30 ans, I guess. 30 in French, isn't it? Yeah.
Oui.
Yeah, oui. Oh, parfait. The podcast is in French now, guys. It's very that coded, right? It's aimed at the young professional despairing at the economic settlement, the economic consensus, and sort of, you know, through bitter eyes and gritted teeth that benefits claimants and immigrants and all the rest of it. But it just strikes me as a demand-side reform, you know, in the same way, sort of stamp duty reform, any of the other various measures that the Tories cooked up over the last 14 years that will just end up sort of heating up the housing market further. And if you don't build more houses, you will not see the resultant decrease in pricing that is necessary for it to become more affordable for first-time buyers.
Yeah, and this is the point that I made in my article about it, which is essentially that in that famous Nicolas 30 ans, I don't know if we're all going to keep trying this, but it's Nick 30 in the British version. And in that, it's sort of a young man, he's 30 years old in the meme, and he's bent over, head in hands, depressed, and arrows are coming out of him showing where his income's going. And, you know, one goes to the NHS, another goes to migrants. But I think probably the most interesting part of this and the most subversive part of that meme is that one of them goes to Simon and Linda, age 70, who are going on a P&O cruise. And that is what this policy is really for. This is a policy for people who want to basically sell their home, they're old, and they need someone to buy it. So if you give Nick 5K and Nick's partner to buy a home, that's 10K. And you add with Elisa, they're getting towards having a deposit. It's not to be sniffed at in that sense. But who is that really for? That money is then going straight to whoever owns the home so they can then sell it off, retire, have a great time, go on the cruise. So if you're a Tory voter, and if you are a Tory voter at the last election, the average age was 63. People believe, well, it's very difficult to tell because we don't know the numbers, that the average age of a Tory member is 57. I'm sure both of those numbers have gone up since. That what are you concerned about? You're concerned about selling your home. You're concerned about moving on. And on some level, you're also concerned about your son, Nick. I think one of the funniest parts of this and the most boomer coded is the idea that Nick has to get a first job first, which is a sort of a sense of like, if only these young people would get up and work and save, they could buy my home and I could retire and move on. And isn't that the real problem with society today? And I do just find that a really funny element of the whole thing, which is it's not Nick getting a job and getting 5K. Also, I think the issue with the 5K, and this is the other thing, is that it's coming from enormous cuts. Truly enormous cuts, and particularly cuts to mental health services. They've decided this idea of someone who has a low-level mental health problem, and so they shouldn't be able to get benefits. Now, I find it interesting, it's the Tory party deciding this. This is medical professionals deciding this. And they're saying, well, okay, you'll no longer be able to claim. Is Nick not sad? Is Nick not depressed?
Yeah. Oh, and he's not working, as they said, so he's not able to buy his house, and he's probably claiming sickness benefit because he's so depressed he just can't work. So, yeah. Gosh.
It's pretty damning, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it's a nice play for relevance, though. It's got us talking. It's got us talking about
anything
them.
on housing, I think,
100%.
is like going to be relevant because it's sort of the biggest issue, especially among young voters, but it's the biggest issue of our time, really.
I also think the headline, again, much like abolish landlords, is immediately appealing. Because the moment I read it, it just sounds like they're going to give you 5k if you get a job. I've actually already got a job. Thank you, New Statesman. Which means that I'm now
welcome, Luke.
I'm now open to get 5k.
Yeah.
So to me, this seems like a really great scenario. And it's only when, again, like everything, you start like digging into the details of how they're going to pay for it. And you realize they're going to pay for it with these brutal set of cuts, which are going to cause a huge amount of misery to the people of Britain. That you ask yourself, is that 5k worth it? It's very selfish. It's very individualistic. And it is prime Tory policy, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I think, it's as Oli said, we do need to accompany that with building more houses because you're not going to get more first-time buyers if we still have the lack of supply that we have right now.
Yeah, housing is as unaffordable now as in the average house price versus as a ratio to average earnings. I think it's north of, I want to say 5 times now. I'm doing it off the top of my head and I don't have the figures in front of me. But basically as a ratio, house prices, average earnings, the last time it was this unaffordable was during the Victorian era when property ownership was the reserve of essentially, the aristocracy. Queen Victoria was on the throne and we hadn't invented cars yet.
Well, 7.7 times according to the ONS.
It's 7.7 times.
Well,
it's extraordinary.
On the abolish landlords thing, what I should say, something very interesting I discovered yesterday was a election campaign poster from 1895.
Here we go.
Which said no landlordism. And can you guess whose campaign poster that was?
1895.
I know the answer, so I can't guess
I asked
because
Luke
she told me.
if it made sense yesterday.
Is it an original Tory party campaign?
Nope. It is one Keir Hardie.
Is it?
The founder of the Independent Labour Party. And that's why I thought it was sort of funny when a couple of Labour MPs, including Chris Bryant, were taking the mick out of abolish landlords. I just thought, well, actually, you should speak to Keir Hardie because he might say something else.
I think there's probably an entirely separate podcast in the soul of the Labour Party and how much its modern iteration appears to have forgotten where it came from. But
Indeed.
I think we may have to leave that for another day.
I was going to say, do you think the ghost of Keir Hardie visits Keir Starmer at night?
Keir Starmer wakes up in a cold sweat.
I think Keir Hardie probably thinks that's a lost cause.
Keir Hardie's ghost got better things to do on a Friday night
Yeah.
than terrorising Keir Starmer.